Hi, folks. I'm Oliver Libby. I'm the host of The Owl Factor and co-founder of HL Ventures and the Resolution Project. On The Owl Factor, as you know, we feature meaningful conversations about the nexus between leadership and trust, the intimate relationship between these two traits that power so much of the human experience is worthy of deep understanding and of discussion with really exciting guests. I'm so glad to see you all back here for the next episode of The Owl Factor. We're being joined by a truly extraordinary person who I'm about to introduce. And our topic today within leadership and trust is the precept of respecting people and being responsive and available. And I think the extraordinary person, Strauss Zelnick, is joining me today, epitomizes that value. Strauss has been a great friend and mentor to me and extraordinarily available and mentorly in every interaction we've had. Strauss has a long history of leading media and communications enterprises. He's deeply involved in originating investments, running companies, advising executives, all the way down to mentees, guiding the strategy and operational initiatives across all of his portfolio company investments. He serves as CEO and chairman of Take-Two Interactive Software, which many of you may or may not know powers some of the most popular games in the industry. So you've probably spent some time with Strauss's properties. Previously, he was president and CEO of BMG Entertainment, which almost certainly was responsible for some of the music that was in your earbuds. At the time, it was one of the world's largest music and entertainment companies with over 200 record labels and operations in 54 countries. Most importantly, though, for this conversation, Strauss is a true leader. He's a mentor and a friend to me, a captain of industry, and an advisor to so many folks. And that's why it's so appropriate that he joins us today on the Owl Factor. So Strauss, I want to thank you for joining us and maybe just ask you, how are you today to kick things off?
Well, after that introduction, I'm very full of myself today. So thank you. I'm good. I appreciate it. That was very kind of you. Overly kind. I do appreciate it.
Of course, of course. You know, with the amount of leadership experience that you have amassed, I wanted to start with something pretty general just to get us into the conversation, which is the organizational premise of our discussions here on the Owl Factor is the link between leadership and trust. And you, like great leaders, have developed a leadership style. So can you start with a few of the precepts about how trust, I should say, figures into your leadership style?
Well, I don't think you actually can lead effectively if people don't trust you. So I think trust factors into every leadership style, no matter what it is. If the team doesn't believe what you're saying, then you have no credible ability to lead. So I'm known for being a truth teller. I'm known for being direct, sometimes too direct, but you always know where you stand. And if I say I'm going to do something, I will try very hard to do it. And if I say I'm not going to do something, I won't do it. And that is, to me, that's sort of table stakes in leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I think setting that expectation and following through it's one of those things where they say common sense is an uncommon virtue. It seems basic, but it's very hard to do that. But I think, you know, you might agree in me saying that once you've established that reputation, it self-propagates, where people know that that's something about you, and it means that there's ever greater trust in all the statements that you make.
Yes, until you screw it up. You know, one of the problems with being seen as a trusted leader or being seen as a credible person is, you know, if you have a lapse, people are very disappointed, and we're all human. We have lapses now and then. So expectations are high, but I think I'd still prefer that over the contrary.
Right. It's the lifetime to build it, minute to lose it kind of thing.
That's exactly right. And actually, I do think, yes, you're known by your reputation, but when you're running a large organization, and we're not the largest, we have about 10,000 colleagues, so we're meaningful, but we're certainly not huge by, you know, Fortune 500 standards. There are new people every day. They have no idea what your reputation is, and there are people, even though I'd like to know everyone, there are people who've never met me in person, and they don't know what my reputation is. So I think you have to get up every day and reestablish who you are and how you do things with your team. I actually think your reputation only goes some of the way. You're tested daily.
No doubt. I noted, by the way, just to drill down for a second, you mentioned 10,000 colleagues. Is the term colleagues kind of an advised, considered term for the organizations that you're running?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that speaks volumes. Actually, it's a great term, and one that people should.
We don't use the word employee.
Yeah, well,
it's inappropriate to say, you know, partner, because not everyone is a partner, but everyone is a colleague. So I use the term because I think it indicates respect.
Well, what a perfect transition to the next thing I wanted to chat about. One of the things, Strauss, that I mentioned in my introduction of you is that somehow, despite all of the lofty positions that you occupy and the decisions that you have to make every day, you are one of those people who seems to be everywhere at once and responsive and available to everyone who wants to talk to you. At least that has been my experience. And so many of the folks that I've talked to who know you say that to be the case. So I know it's not just anecdotal. And again, one of the precepts of today's conversation is this idea that being responsive demonstrates, as you just said, respect for others. How is it that someone who has achieved the level of leadership that you have is able to generate and honor the responsiveness and availability that you seem to do for all those who want to benefit from your wisdom?
Well, I'm a pretty efficient person, so that helps. I know what my priorities are. My friend Kevin Ryan said you can only have 3 or 4 priorities at a time. And mine, I stretch it to 4. He would prefer 3. For me, family and friends, work, fitness, and charitable work and mentoring and coaching, which means there are a whole bunch of things I like that can't be on that list. I think it's a uniquely American fantasy that you can have it all. And I'm always concerned when leaders give you their daily schedule. Like, I get up at 3:30, then I work out for 2 hours. I read, I meditate for 45 minutes. Then I do some yoga, solve some of the world's problems. Then by 8:30, I'm at my desk and I hit it hard for the next 14 hours. Then I go home and cook a vegan meal for the family and the like. I just don't think it's certainly not doable for me. I need to get a reasonable amount of sleep. I want to spend time with my family. I want to go to the gym, and I want to do my work and also enjoy myself. So in order to achieve that, and also to make sure that all my priorities are honored, including charitable work and mentoring and coaching, I have to look at my day and organize it accordingly, which I do. The other thing is it's a value. I was taught by Barry Dillard, you're never too busy to respond to a phone call every day and to an email. If you call Barry, which I do rarely, if I have something to talk about, you're gonna he'll pick up the phone right away, but it'll be a really quick call. And I criticize sometimes, you were kind enough just to mention the compliments, for having quick meetings. But I will meet with everyone, I will respond, but the meeting might last 15 or 20 minutes. It won't last, it's very unlikely that it'll last an hour, because generally you can kind of conduct the business you need to conduct in 15 or 20 minutes, and I'll move on to the next thing. So I think in order to be efficient, sometimes I might unintentionally hurt people's feelings about the amount of time I'll devote, but I am able to be very highly responsive.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important thing. I've, obviously to a lesser degree, but I do a similar thing, which is if we have something to cover, or you have a question for me, I'll be around. And once we've talked about that and checked in quickly, we're good. But so I think the quantum of time is a really interesting thing to be able to wield, because it is the one thing that, your 24 hours are no longer than anyone else's. So if your concept is to be available to people, there's going to be naturally some different quantums of time that you're offering to folks.
Right.
I think that's a great takeaway for folks as well. I'm hoping, by the way, to have Kevin on the Owl Factor at some point soon. Given his touch for starting companies, we'll see if he finds some time as well.
He's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, no doubt. So one of the things that strikes me about your career, Strauss, is you've been able to be successful as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as both a direct senior leader and a board member within larger organizations. And I'm curious as to how trust and building trust across these organizations differs from sector to sector, or size of organization to size of organization. Are there differences in the way that you operate across those kind of different areas within your career, or has it been the same bedrock principles that govern those interactions?
Well, I'm always the same, but the job obviously changes. So being a board member or a board chair of a huge organization is quite different than being a partner at a small investment firm, which ZMC was when we first started. And even today, the way we operate ZMC, which is a partnership, is exceedingly different than the way we operate Take-Two, which is a corporation. The culture is not particularly different because the leadership is the same, but the daily rhythm is quite different.
Are there certain bedrock principles of that culture that you're willing to share?
Yes, and they're promulgated. So the culture of Take-Two is reflected in its mission statement, which is on its website, and the culture of ZMC is reflected in its mission statement, which is on its website. And in both instances, you'll find the notion of being of service to our customers, being honest, transparent, direct, hardworking in service of our goals, and kind.
One of the things that we work with, especially because in my work in venture capital, we have entrepreneurs who start very small. We, as a venture studio, a lot of our stuff starts on the back of a napkin, and we're with the companies throughout their journey. So as they hit a Series A or certainly a Series B or later, suddenly we've noted that their number of direct reports actually compresses down, but the quality of those direct reports and the relationship that they have to build with the 3, 4, 5 people that then run their departments for them is extremely important. And one of the things I've noted is it actually somewhat separates the leader from the rank and file in their organization, because now you've consolidated down to some powerful, direct report senior management types. And the question is, number one, how do you maintain then the trust with the rest of the organization? And how do you inculcate in those direct reports what you want to see in the leadership culture of your organization?
Communication in both instances. So in the case of the larger group, we believe in having regular large group meetings. So we have town hall meetings at Take-Two every quarter. I actually run 3 of them on Zoom and in person when we can, so that I can actually speak to every time zone in which we operate without people being inconvenienced overly. So I do one in the morning for Europe, I do one in early afternoon for North America, and I do one late at night for Asia and Pacific. And in those meetings, I talk candidly and openly and answer anyone's questions. And I'm asked pretty tough questions sometimes. We're a public company. We've been doing this since we took over the company more than 14 years ago. We've never had a leak. We've never had anything published. And again, Take-Two is 6,800 people. So it's a relatively big, far-flung company. But the culture is we're there to speak honestly about what's going on. Of course, we're going to keep this internal. ZMC is a much smaller company. There are 34 of us. We meet every Monday as a group. So pretty much everything is out there. At the senior management level at Take-Two, going back to a bigger organization, we have a weekly team meeting. We have very few weekly meetings at organizations. We don't really believe in them, but we do have a weekly team meeting, actually at ZMC and at Take-Two. And the Take-Two meeting has all the group heads and all the senior staff people attending. So there are a total of about 18 attendees group-wide. That's kind of the leadership of the whole company. And in that meeting, we update everyone on what's going on. So Carl Sleidoff is the president of Take-Two and a partner at ZMC, and I don't have standing meetings with the team because that is our standing meeting. And one of the parts of the culture, reflected in culture of transparency and honesty and being direct, is that you talk about everything in that meeting. And in the beginning, that was kind of shocking to people because it's not the way most companies run. But I don't want a hub and spoke approach. I want us all to be on the same page. The other thing to think about when you're trying to build culture and a unified approach to leading a business is take a look at compensation, because compensation will drive culture more than the words will drive culture. Our compensation programs at all of our enterprises are formulaic, which is to say, we establish what the group's goals are, and if we achieve our goals, you get paid, and if we don't achieve our goals, you don't, and everyone's treated the same way, myself included. So equity obviously is a great leveler. For those who have equity, we're obviously all in service of, working in service of creating equity value. For the entire team, annual incentive comp is driven by our performance, our P&L performance versus plan. And we don't have other forms of compensation. We don't have discretionary compensation. So if you want to see a bad culture, first look at the compensation. If you want to see a good culture, first look at the compensation. Good cultures tend to be driven by formulaic programs that are transparent and clear. Bad cultures tend to be driven by discretionary comp, where the boss or bosses decide based on how they feel what kind of compensation people will have at year end. I'm obviously talking about professional organizations now. So why am I so opposed to discretionary comp? Well, think about it. How am I compensating you, particularly in a large organization, when I'm the CEO and there are 20 division heads? Do I really have a sense of how you did? Am I really doing all that homework? Or do I more have a sense of whether I like you or not, whether I think you're smart or not, what my interactions were with you? So next thing you know, discretionary comp organizations are basically organizations where the person who does what I do is surrounded by people, hovering outside the office to say, wow, you look great today. Or that idea you had, but that was a brilliant idea. Who would have ever thought of that? But since we don't compensate anyone for that, and to the contrary, actually, they're only compensated in how the company performs. Performance is based on two things: the revenues you bring in and the costs that go out. And that's how people are paid. Well, what are they going to try to do? Increase the revenues, decrease the costs. So if I have a dumb idea that's not going to increase revenue or is going to increase costs, my people are going to sit down in the middle of the road and say, that's a really bad idea. Sorry not to offend you, but that's a bad idea. And that's what happens. People also know I'm allergic to cheap flattery, not because I'm above it. It's because I'm not above it. No humans are above it. And, my ego is definitely fragile enough that, a little cheap flattery would go a long way. So I don't have the luxury of availing myself of it. So when people start, I'm like, thank you so much. Like, we're not doing that. But if you have some constructive criticism, I welcome that. So the combination of stated culture, ongoing communication, and compensation programs that are aligned with the culture get you most of the way there. Most companies don't look at it that way. Most companies, in fact, the mission statement doesn't even align with what you're actually doing. Especially broad mission statements, like companies are like, do no harm. It's sort of the Silicon Valley mission statement. That's goofy in the extreme. Like, our job around, yes, we would love to do no harm, but our mission at Take Two is to make interactive entertainment and to do it really, really, really well, better than everyone else, and to do it in a certain kind of way. Our mission at ZMC is to invest in and build media and entertainment and communications companies, and to do it in a certain kind of way. But to say, we'd like to be all things to all people at all times and be really cool while we're doing it, that's not a mission statement. So people struggle with that. By the way, the best test of a mission statement struggling is if people can't agree on what it is. Then you have a problem. We didn't have a mission statement on our website at ZMC. So I decided, wow, we ask this of all our companies. We don't ask it of ourselves. We have to do that. We were at a retreat. On the fly, in the retreat, Sheila DeMarajan, who runs business development and is a partner in the firm, and I put together sort of a straw person. That took us about 20 minutes. We brought it to the group at large. We discussed it for another 15 minutes. That was it. Because everyone knew we were already on the same page.
Well, yeah. So and those can be hellacious processes.
Has to be aligned with the strategy, has to be aligned with compensation, has to be aligned with the culture.
Totally. Yeah, no, some of those processes for mission statements are legendary in their challenge and difficulty. And to your point, I think if you can come to that conclusion quickly, that's a testament. I also love the fact, in a sense, the argument you're making here is that compensation is a form of communication, right? It says something to your people, and it says something how you do it, and it even says what you expect of them or not very clearly, right? So in a sense, it all rolls up to that transparency and communication you keep referring to.
Yes, it is a form of communication, just a very powerful form.
Yes, yeah, but it's heard loud and clear, and it's hard to argue with a quantitative format like that. So, to be sure, I wanted to spend some time just because I think you have spent your career in what might call kind of the information economy, right? And I often talk about information as a vascular system, especially when you're looking at a republic like the United States. But I'm curious. Just to spend a few minutes on various aspects of this. First of all, in your career, what are some of the salient changes you've seen in the information vascular system and the information economy, especially over the last couple of decades when so many things have come to pass?
Well, obviously, the advent of the internet has changed everything in terms of the ability to publish, the ability to have a voice. It has also injected commerce into journalism in a way that wasn't the case before. And so journalism has taken on a different form today than it had when it was harder to get on the air, harder to get in front of people. It used to be incredibly challenging to get into the newspaper. It used to be challenging to get into a magazine or get on television. And only the best and the brightest could work in those enterprises. And the people who ran them saw it as in many instances, certainly not all instances, saw it as a terribly important responsibility to make sure that the news was conveyed in a certain way. I can't complain about this because I'm part of this business, obviously. I do this for a living. But it is true that that's just, completely changed. And journalists now are often paid by the click. They're paid for attention. And we attend to emergencies as human beings. It's where we're wired. We attend to screaming. We attend to bad news. We attend to gossip much more than we attend to good news, boring news, or news or information that requires a lot of thinking. So that's what we get. So today's, in today's world, as you know, we're struggling to have credible sources of information that we can all agree upon.
No doubt. And actually, where do you think trust flows from in media today? What are the things that make an outlet or a person trusted in today's media environment?
Sadly, today, I think a lot of it is, do I agree? And this is both sides of the aisle, by the way. This is not partisan. This is, do I agree with the tone and tenor? If I do, I believe it. If I don't, I don't. It used to be, you're a lot younger than I, but you remember it used to be the big disagreement about the paper of record in the United States was Wall Street Journal or New York Times. The one was perceived to be right, the other was perceived to be left, but everyone would agree they were both papers of record. Everyone would agree they were both credible. Sure, the opinion pages had a certain slant, and the news even could have a bit of a slant, but generally speaking, people would say, yeah, there's a bit of a right or left slant, but I'm good with both. We're so not in that world today. We're in the world of networks that are strictly attuned to a certain opinion set, and they're not interested in any other audience, and no other audience is interested in them. And then, of course, add to that the need to scream at them to get attended to, because we pay attention when we're screamed at, sadly. So you turn on, again, I'm not going to say the name of the network because the implication will be it's one type or another. It really doesn't matter. Turn on a news channel, turn on a sports channel, turn on financial news, you're getting screamed at. It's exhausting. And often what is being screamed at you is simply not accurate. Either it's been dumbed down so much so that you'll attend quickly that it can't be accurate, or it's specifically not accurate because it's tailored to what you want to hear.
Yeah, and I think some of that also applies to credentials, which have been somewhat watered down, right? You'll see, kind of a false equivalency between two people. And again, I don't think this is a particular province of one political stripe or other, but it does seem like we've debased the value of credentials in a lot of ways. And it comes back down to exactly what you said, which is, do I agree with what I'm hearing or not? In which case I believe it. Is there...
and people are trying to address it. The problem is that people who are trying to address it aren't screaming, and they're not producing clickbait. So therefore, guess what? No one's attending to them.
Well, right. I mean, I think the question, especially as relates to what we're talking about today, is as a leader with this as the information environment, how does one lead when you're in a fragmented information environment, and particularly when it seems like, your people inhabit potentially entirely different information spheres, whether it be the question of the day, of course, is vaccination or not vaccination, but it could be almost anything. How does one lead in a situation where your people are not looking at the same playbook of information potentially?
I just tell the truth as I see it. And I don't wade into areas that have nothing to do with our business if I can possibly avoid it.
Yeah, I think that's
even though I'm often asked to. I have a big enough podium because, I'm in the entertainment business and we have big properties. And that's always been the case for me, that, if I chose to wade into a broader area, it would be covered, and I stay away from it.
That makes total sense. I want to bring us to a close. You've been very generous with your time and your insights, Strauss, but we always close out on two questions here on the Owl Factor. The first one, we talked a little bit about this in our very first question, but since it's tradition, are there 2 or 3 core leadership principles that you want to share with our audience as a parting shot, something to keep in mind? You've shared some really cool stuff already, but any 2 or 3 things that have really powered your leadership throughout your career?
I was given 3 pieces of advice, not necessarily about leadership, but about success when I was in grad school, and I would accost unsuspecting CEOs who came to speak to us. The 3 pieces of advice came from everyone in one form or another, and they were: first, work hard. There's no substitute for hard work. Second, listen. Most people don't listen. They talk, and they don't really listen. And the third is never compromise your integrity. I think those are good pieces of advice for everyone, and I think they're consistent with leadership. I think additionally, a leader does have to have the ability to gather a team, come up with a common purpose and vision with the team, translate that into a strategy with the team, and then have the ability to persuade, inject enthusiasm, celebrate wins, and address losses on an ongoing basis. And some ability, when called upon, to solve problems effectively and quickly. I think if you can do all of that, and then you can do it with common decency, transparency, honesty, and kindness, you're way ahead of the game. But now I'm describing the style to which I aspire. And there are lots of different leadership styles that can be effective. And I've seen many that don't look anything like mine. And I've seen some really great leaders. And I'll usually sort of kick myself and say, why don't I do it that way? But ultimately, you have to be true to yourself and your own style, and that's mine.
To be sure, especially when we're talking about things like leadership and trust, the conversation can get very heavy. We can end up in places like information fragmentation and things that I think are large, difficult to handle problems. So my favorite thing to do at the end of our conversation, Strauss, is to ask if there's something that brings you hope and optimism to leave with our viewers here at the Owl Factor as my final question.
Well, I'm an optimist, so I'm optimistic about virtually everything. I think the world is becoming a safer place and a better place. There are far fewer wars than we used to have. There's less poverty than we used to have. There's great opportunity ahead. We're embarking upon a multi-year economic expansion that I think will not only benefit the wealthy who've been benefited in the last 10 years, particularly in the last couple of years, but I think will benefit a much broader array of humanity, not just in the US, but outside. And technology is propelling us forward in every possible way. I think we're finally going to get our arms around climate change. I think everyone's taking the environment much more seriously, again, on both sides of the aisle. And I think the horrific events in the past year that reflected intolerance and racism have caused a lot of our society, again, on both sides of the aisle, to re-examine how we operate and to determine that we want to and must do better. I think the world's in a great place, and I think it's a shame that we don't celebrate that more. It's a truth that we can always do more, but we're well positioned as a society to do more, and I think we will do more, and we will do better in the coming years.
Well, that was a great place to bring us to a close. Strauss, thank you. I appreciate it, Strauss. Again, I appreciate not only you spending time with us today on the Owl Factor and answering these questions, but also your friendship and your mentorship over the years. You are someone who lives everything that you've said today. That's not something that can be said about every piece of media that's out there, and people are talking about things that they don't live, but you live everything you say, because I've been there for about a decade now watching it. So with great appreciation, Strauss, I wish you a great day. Everyone on the Owl Factor, we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us, and take care.
Thanks for having me.